Hello and welcome to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. I'm Matt Addison, Ian Doyle, David Lynch and Rich Garnett all with me. In what's becoming a familiar theme on the show, we'll be talking about some more drop points for the Reds and analysing some familiar issues. We'll also be previewing the tricky visit to Napoli that comes midweek as the Champions League gets underway. Goalie though, let's start with Everton on Saturday. I think a draw was probably a fair result on the day. Liverpool could have won it like they did against Newcastle, but I think it probably would have papered over the cracks a little bit. What did you make of the game?
Well, anybody who listens to our podcast will know that I said it was going to finish 0-0. So, well done.
First thing you said to me at full time.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like I actually know what I'm talking about sometimes. Paper over what cracks? What cracks? I'm going to ask you, Matt. What are the cracks? That's a very leading question. I want you to tell me what the cracks are.
Well, I think there's probably quite a few cracks at the moment. Maybe that wasn't the perfect cliche to start with, but I think the midfield didn't look particularly great. I think the substitution of James Milner coming on at right back wasn't particularly a brilliant decision. I know there's a number of sort of things that Liverpool have kind of got their hands tied to a certain extent. I don't think Darwin Nunez looked particularly brilliant. I thought Diaz and Salah looked a little bit isolated at times. I think it's fair to say there are a few issues with Liverpool in the start of the
you
season.
could argue that all three of those forwards did hit the woodwork, so they can't have been absolutely awful. And I think I did a piece on Salah yesterday, basically saying I think no Liverpool player made more key passes, and only Nunez had more shots. And I think Nunez had more shots than anybody else in the game. Now I know it's not exactly going to plan. Although, again, if you listen to me at the podcast earlier this season, I did say it was going to be a transitional season to a certain degree. But we can't just keep on going through this. We have to just go each game at a time. Sound like a manager now, and just look at it from that. I mean, take everything out of isolation. Liverpool have drawn 9 of their last 11 visits to Goodison. Forget last season where they won 4. The other one that they won in like the 94th minute, wasn't it? When Mane scored. Yeah. So the game just went exactly as the game always goes at Goodison. The difference is that last season Everton were all over the shop, and this year it looks like they actually know what they're actually meant to be doing defensively. And Liverpool still managed to hit the post 3 times, and Pickford was man of the match. So while Liverpool were not by any means great, and probably draw was the right result, had they nicked a goal, I don't think anybody could have really complained, because you just sat down, looked at the stats and gone, well, there you go. The problem is that everyone's comparing everything to last season, and Liverpool won 4-1 there for reasons that I've just explained. Liverpool obviously, 63 games, nearly won, came close to winning all 4 things. That was never going to happen again. And I think people are getting a little bit worried about the way things are going. Yeah, I don't think anybody can argue with the fact it doesn't look right at the moment, but there's a very good reason why it doesn't look right. That's the midfield. You've got a midfield that they haven't got enough players that are available, which isn't functioning properly. Throw on top of that, you've got certain players like Van Dijk, who's not at his best, Trent, who was not very good at all on Saturday. Although weirdly, defensively, he didn't have much issues, because I think he made one very good clearance actually just before half time, which he needed to get in. It's going forward, and that's his forte. His passes were all over the place, and that's the worry. I mean, that's how Newcastle scored their first goal on Wednesday, where Trent tried this ridiculous pass. Well, actually, to be fair to him, it's not a ridiculous pass at all for him. It's a pass he makes all the time. He just got it completely wrong, and then Newcastle went away, and that's how they got on the attack. Nunez, for the first 40 minutes, I kind of felt sorry for him, because Liverpool didn't know what to do with him, and who knew that if you play a ball over the top, he can run onto it, and then he has this shot. And then I think after that, for about 20 minutes in the start of the second half, he was actually quite lively, and he got a few shots away. You can tell he's trying a bit too hard, though, can't you? With some of his shots are a bit hurried. But that gave Everton something to think about. Diaz for about 20 minutes looked all right. And as I said before about Salah, the last 10, 15 minutes, he was the one who was looking very likely to score. And I take your point on substitution, but about Milner. But Milner came on at right back against Newcastle and made a massive difference. So you can't exactly blame Klopp for doing that. I think the problem they had is that Everton straight away went, let's just hit the ball over the top of him to the far post. And to be fair to Liverpool, what was it? About 15, 20 minutes into that, they went, what can't we do with this? And then they put Milner into midfield, where he was a lot better. So I do think Liverpool had a few issues in that, but there's not a lot you can do when you don't have the sufficient players to play the game you want to play. And also then some players who are key to the way you want to play just aren't on form. I mean, the 2 left backs, I thought Tsimikas was okay, Robertson was okay, but they've hardly pulled up trees this season, absolutely the pair of them, and we know how important the fullbacks are to the way Liverpool play. So overall, while I wouldn't say they were cracks, I'd say they were more what would a dirty windscreen? Do we say? Can we say it needs a bit of a wash? You know what I mean? A bit of a clean. It needs something. I don't necessarily mean that you have to go down to auto glass and get the whole thing replaced, but I do think that there is let's put it this way: it was literally 3 days earlier they beat Newcastle 2-1, and they played really well in the second half, coming from behind. Things aren't as bad as some people are portraying. I just think that while I know Lynchy's going to have a massive threat in a minute because I know what he's going to say. Yeah, I do. I think that, and the transfer window's shut now, so anybody wants a new midfielder, forget it. Liverpool just have to get on with this, and they will know that there are sufficient answers in the squad for them to actually get themselves out of a situation that, weirdly, how many points are they off the top four? Is it 4 or 3? It's not, but then
we're 6 points off top, so not a lot.
But then they're only 2 points ahead of Bournemouth, which tells you how early we are into the season.
I take your point in terms of the chances, and they could have obviously won it. But I also think there wasn't loads of clear-cut chances where there were lots of shots which kind of build up a picture of the game close a few times, but it didn't feel like
football. That's football. I mean, that's exactly how the game works.
It's not been Liverpool football for the last sort of 2-3 seasons necessarily, has it, at Liverpool's best? But Lynchy, I'll let you come in. Doyle said you're going to have a moan, so are you?
No, God forgive me. I actually agree with Ian. I genuinely think that this result should almost be viewed in isolation to what has gone before. I think, the start of the season, there have been some serious issues, but I think there's green shoots at Everton, bizarrely, even though it's a disappointing result. And you could say, the VAR thing that went against Everton, that's a little bit of good fortune, or is it a good defensive line, I suppose. But I fall on the side of positivity, really, in terms of performance. I agree. I think every game you go to Goodison Park is going to be difficult. They make it scrappy, they make it difficult and hard, and yet you come away. There's this bizarre consensus that it was a terrible performance, and yet also everyone agrees that Jordan Pickford was by far the man of the match, and Liverpool hit the post 3 times. So those two things can't coexist, and yet they seemingly do in the narrative around this game. I think Liverpool did create chances. I think opportunities to hit the woodwork that many times for starters, but also moments where, for example, the one where Tsimikas skies it over, that's sort of a better chance than it looks, and moments where they were creating danger like that. And I think you've just got to look at it as another Goodison Park game where they will make it difficult. The crowd is up, the atmosphere is really intense there, and yet Liverpool come away with, for me, probably the best of the chances. A little bit more dominant and slightly more control in midfield than they've shown in the past, which I think is fascinating considering the midfield they started with and the midfield that started some of the games earlier in the season that has shown far less control. This is much less orthodox in terms of going much more forward thinking with having Elliott and Carvalho there, and yet as was the case later in the Newcastle game, seemed to almost impose more control just through the threat of its attacking quality rather than using orthodox midfielders to sort of keep possession and those people who are more adept at tackling and things like that. I think that sort of gives you a little bit of a blueprint, and I think there were several other positives to come from it in terms of Diogo Jota coming back from injury. I think Nunez, yes, at times he looks a little bit lost, but they're getting used to him, and that's almost like a second debut for him. And will be a really important game going forward. I think he'll find it easy when he gets back to Anfield as well. And let's get a goal under his belt and see if he can go from there. And we know Thiago's back in training this week as well, which is another major boost. So I think, considering what it could have been and what the performances have been at points this season, I think Liverpool can come away from that and think, you know what, in isolation, a point's not a bad result there. It was a better performance in a lot of elements, and there's a lot that we can take forward. And I think, these next 2 games are obviously massive, but I think take the positives from the Everton game rather than seeing it as part of this run of dropping points in 4 out of 6 games. Not least because that run has still got you within 6 points of the lead, 5 points of City, and that and we're talking about a woeful Liverpool start here. There are green shoots, and I think Liverpool should cling to those going forward because I think there were enough positives there for me.
Yeah, they were absolutely positives. I do think the chances that Everton had on the counter were just as big as the Liverpool ones, to be honest. The Neil Maupay one, I think a better striker than him would score that.
Everton don't have a better striker than that, though, do they? That's the point,
well, no,
I suppose.
that's exactly why Liverpool should be beating them. But I mean, the other one as well, the Cody one is literally 0.1 of a second.
A great defensive line, I would call that.
Yeah.
Okay. It's offside. It's just She was going wide anyway, wasn't it? So
yeah, it was going wide. That's why he had to touch it. But yeah, 0.1 of a difference. But anyway, Rich, I'll bring you in at this point. Let's talk about the midfield and the control and that kind of thing. Are you with Ian and Lynchy? Are you kind of on the more positive side of the midfield? Where are you at with things?
Not really. Someone's got to play devil's advocate on this, I suppose. But I certainly agree with the fact that you can take this result in isolation. Goodison is Goodison. It's not a particularly easy place for Liverpool to go. The results have shown that, and I do think it was, on balance, it was probably a fair result. Everton looked like they've improved a bit. They were starting from a fairly low base, admittedly, but they had some good performances across the park and made it difficult for Liverpool. I am worried about this midfield situation, though, and I think that the key word is just not functioning, and it doesn't seem to matter which personnel is in there at the moment. The balance doesn't look right, and just control of the game just isn't there at the moment. So, and I don't know. I just don't know whether the lack of performance level from the fullbacks at the moment is exposing that even more, because you've seen many games where Liverpool are creating their chances through Trent and Robbo and getting the balls into Salah and Mane, and the midfield. I wouldn't say it was redundant, but the reliance on them to create those chances is minimised a little bit more. It just doesn't seem to be the case at the moment, and the balance in there it's just all over the case, isn't it? I mean, how old is James Milner? Is he 36? Had a good pre-season. Wasn't surprised at all to see him be involved as much as he has been so far in this season, because obviously he's trusted, he's experienced, and a Klopp favourite to that end. But it's almost like he's been that sort of ever-present almost in this midfield at the moment at times, whereas the captain has been struggling. Now he's injured. Fabinho's been in and out. Thiago injured. And Melo coming in now, an experienced player, but someone who hasn't exactly set the world alight at the two big clubs that he's played at. So I want to be more positive about it, but if you're asking me who would they have in that three in midfield at the moment, I'm not really sure what the answer is.
Yeah, there were moments, Doyle, where Liverpool had control, but there were also moments where Everton, I think, had a 6-on-2 or a 7-on-3 or whatever it was on the counter after a Liverpool corner, and things like that. Liverpool do need to change something in that midfield. They have to get a level of control where that's not going to be possible, because surely a better team than Everton and better teams than Everton are coming very quickly for Liverpool in the fixture list. They just can't do that against those teams.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the midfield, is it? That's got to do with the marking at corners and where they should be stood. I think that's not. I mean, that doesn't necessarily have. I don't think that's got anything to do with control midfield, people breaking on counter attacks. I just think Liverpool got a little bit carried away at times, and Klopp said that. He said we were way too open. I think possibly just keeping one more player back would have solved all of that issue. They were just so keen to score a goal, I think, by that point. In terms of the midfield control, I mean, he didn't really have to control the midfield, did he? Because Everton played most of the game, men behind the ball. So if anything, you could kind of see why Elliott and Carvalho started, because Liverpool knew they'd get loads of the ball and they wanted to create some more stuff. And both of them had played really well against Newcastle. I can say, obviously, Carvalho did, his first start, wasn't it? Yeah, his first start and a derby, and for a Liverpool team that's not 100% with some changes, new players bedding in. And against an Everton team, we're just going to sit back, and that crowd, very raucous. I think it was asking quite a lot, especially when he then gets a dead leg. So, that also asking quite a bit of Harvey Elliott for a bit in the second half when he was playing in the two midfield, which was not quite right, I don't think. And I said before, to be fair, Liverpool recognised that within about 10, 15, 20 minutes and made the change. So I think it's going to be like that. Going to be like that for a while now, is that Liverpool just muddling through because of the players that they've got available in midfield. Some games they'll get the the balance right from the off. Some games they'll have to make the changes. Some games it just won't work. But then how is that any different to any other football game? You know what I mean? It's just the thing about Liverpool last season is that they had so many players available, so many players who knew the roles, and so many players who'd been there for so long, is that people could just come in and they knew exactly what they had to do. And Carvalho and Elliott are two players who haven't played very much, so they're learning the trade. You got Arthur, or Arthur as Theo calls him. He'll be coming in, and he'll have the same problem, although of course he's a lot more experienced than those two. And then they've got the added complication of you got the Nunez up front, someone else that they're having to adapt to as well. So there's quite a lot going on there. I think that's it's the old thing about Nunez is the worst thing that could have possibly happened to him isn't so much the headbutts Crystal Palace defender, it's that all the players behind him become unavailable. So in terms of the pitch, so it's harder for him to get going, and that in turn makes him a little bit more frustrated. But he's not the first striker that's happened to. This happens all the time to lots of clubs. It's just that Liverpool, as Rich said, Everton were going from a very low base. Liverpool are going from a very high one, and everything's going to be compared to what happened last season. And anybody thinks that was going to happen again. It was never going to happen. Never going to happen. Liverpool spent years building up to that, and then the one player who was a constant in all of that, Mane, is now left. So there was always going to be this kind of thing. And also, one thing, and I mentioned this on a pod the other day that's been overlooked, is Liverpool's fixture list away from home is actually quite difficult. Who's the next away game? Chelsea. The three hardest away games of a season for Liverpool: United, Chelsea, Everton, and City. And they'll have played three of them in the first four away games. So, yeah, it's the imperfect storm has happened. But, as Lynchy said, how many points off the top? I've already forgotten. Is it 5 or 6?
6.
6 off
5
the
off
top.
City, 6 off
5
top.
off City. Well, it's basically 5 off the top of City because Arsenal are winning the league. Let's not go down that road. But Arsenal will be a team that will be challenging for the top 4. And that's going to be Liverpool's most immediate aim for this season, for the majority of it now. They're not soft. And I think Klopp, I was talking with some people going out leaving the ground actually on Saturday, that Klopp's next job, and he's already started, is going to be managing expectations, because while the miserable likes of me could see this coming, there's an awful lot of supporters who couldn't see this coming and thought they'd just be challenging City straight away for the league. And they're going to have to learn that it's going to be a little bit different this season. And it could well be, as a lot of us suspected, it's going to be 2 seasons just put together. The first bit, see how far behind you get, and then the second bit, which starts in December, when you'd like to think Liverpool have quite a lot of players back by then, and everybody would have been, got settled in. And as we've said quite a few times on these podcasts, a lot of the players are not going to be in the World Cup, so they'll get a bit of a rest. It will be interesting to see what happens. So for Liverpool in the Premier League, the job over the next, how many games is it? 12? 12 until they split? I think it's 12. Their job is just to basically just try and stay, hang in there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we expected a bit of a difference in terms of the fluidity and the performances. But I suppose if Diogo Jota had been fit, if Thiago had stayed fit the first few games, maybe you get that adjustment. But you also managed to beat Fulham. You also managed to get that goal against Palace. Maybe Darwin Nunez doesn't get sent off. Maybe that sort of changes that one as well. So I think it can be a little bit of both, can't it? But let's just touch on Arthur now, Lynchy. I mean, is he the answer almost to the midfield? Is it too early to just throw him in? We'll come on to Napoli very shortly, but it does seem like a bit of a risk almost to put him in straight away and expect him to adapt, considering all of the other adaptations that are going to be happening around him at the same time.
Yeah, I doubt even Liverpool's recruitment staff see him as the answer. I'm very sceptical about the idea that the permanent clause in his contract is going to get triggered at any point. I just can't see it. I think, it's got to be taken as what it was, which was basically a last gasp bid to get a body in. I'm not saying he's a totally terrible footballer or anything like that, but I just don't think he's a long-term fit for Liverpool, and I really can't see that they see him in that way either. And in terms of, making an instant impact, that's going to be difficult because he hasn't played for a while. So the match fitness isn't there. So, he's almost got to embark on his own little mini pre-season, also get used to how Liverpool play. But the options are so thin there that you wonder whether they will just take the risk of throwing him in. I suppose they've got very little choice in terms of if they want to keep some element of rotation going until they get some bodies back in midfield. They are probably going to have to use him straight away, which is a difficult situation to be in, one that doesn't make it easier to sort of think that the performances are going to suddenly massively improve in terms of controlling the midfield unless he just, beats all expectations and really hits the ground running, which maybe could happen. But yeah, very much a sort of stopgap to get a body in, so that Liverpool can go after the sort of preferred targets further down the line. And anything he does contribute this season really will, I think, should be seen as a bonus, to be honest.
Yeah, I can almost see it now. By the way, fan websites. He's not a totally terrible footballer. Disrespected Liverpool journalist passes verdict on some signing.
If someone said that about me, I'd be absolutely made up.
I said disrespected.
If that's not a glowing endorsement, I don't know what is.
Exactly.
I think you're spot on, to be fair, Lynch. I think the 32 million clause, isn't it? I think at the end of the season, that feels very much like a convincing Arthur that they do like him. Trust us, even though we moved for you late, but we do trust you. We'll see what happens with that. Just before we move on to Napoli, then let's finish on another couple of positives. We kind of mentioned them already, Rich, in terms of Jota, Thiago coming back. Is that what it's going to take really for Liverpool to get that consistency of performance? Is it just a case of get one or two players back and things could look a little bit different?
I think so. Thiago's clearly become very important to Liverpool's midfield now, and we're just back on the subject of control. I think he can bring that and maybe a bit of reassurance to some of the other players around him as well. I thought Jota and his little cameo looked very lively when he came on at Goodison. I was quite pleased to see him back in the fold, and you wonder what Klopp will do now, how quickly he'll want to get him back on the pitch from the start, or whether he'll bide his time with his current trio. But yeah, the simple fact of the matter is he's now got options, hasn't he? He's not being forced to field pretty much one side. He can change things up for different matches, or try and seek out the weaknesses of certain opponents and use the right players for it. But I would expect Jota to plenty to do in the next couple of weeks, and I'm pretty much looking forward to seeing him doing that, because he is a player I very much like.
Yeah, things have got to improve in terms of the performance. If you look at the fixture list, obviously Napoli we'll come to in a second. Wolves, Ajax, Chelsea, Arsenal, Rangers, Man City and West Ham all to come. So as Doyle said before, it is a tricky fixture list for Liverpool to get through. But let's talk Napoli then, Doyle. It's probably quite easily the toughest fixture of the group stage for Liverpool. Away at Napoli is not going to be an easy one, but how do you sort of see it working out for Liverpool? Is there a case almost, I think, maybe that a bit more space behind probably wouldn't be the worst thing for Darwin Nunez? Maybe this is a bit of an opportunity for one or two players, even though it's going to be really tough.
I think the first thing is, are the police there for you, Matt? I can hear them. We had seagulls, and who else was there? There's been quite a few different noises.
There was police last time as well.
Everything happens around yours, doesn't it? Yeah.
I do live next to a police station, I should point out.
Yeah, that's what they all say. Oh, right. Napoli. Naples. Yes. It'll be a third time for me. Looking for the hat trick of... Yeah, well, we can imagine what that's all about. The actual game itself, I mean, I was looking at Napoli's... the Napoli don't have a lot of players who you say are recognisable, because it's a strange one for us here in England, because obviously when I was growing up, Italian football was a big deal. It was on Channel 4, etc., etc. Now it's not, and it's still not difficult to find it, but the players aren't quite as prominent as they used to be. And I think there aren't many players in the Napoli squad that, say, apart from the football manager crew, would know who they are. So, but they've got some good results. They're not far off the top of the table, are they?
Top.
At the moment? They are top. There you go. They can't get any more nearer than actually being on top. So so that shows you. I did see that they did win at the weekend at Lazio 2-1. So I've been paying some attention. I just didn't see
they are top, but they have won 3 and drawn 2, so they're not absolutely flying, but they are top.
Udinese beat Roma 3-0, I think it was last night, and that kept Roma off the top.
There we go. So Napoli have been doing quite well. It's a strange one, because I've been there twice before and seen Liverpool play. First one was years ago in Europa League, drew 0-0, absolute waste of time. They got beat 2-0 the last time I was there, and in between they also lost 1-0. And they were in successive Champions League group games where it was very early on in the group. It was the first away game, which again, that's 3 times in a row now that's happened, which is again unusual. And Liverpool finish at home to Napoli. Now that is very unusual. So they can't really. I mean, I just personally just talk generally the group as a whole. I think it's going to be really close. I think they can all beat each other, if I'm being honest. Certainly at the moment, you'd expect Liverpool to get through because they are the better team. But going to Naples and Ajax with fans in this time, and Rangers. I mean, Rangers in particular, that'll be a very intense occasion. So you can see anything could happen in those. Yeah, and then Napoli is probably the one game Liverpool, the one team Liverpool didn't really want because they played them so many times recently. There's nothing new there, even though a lot of the players will be. But there won't be any fear from Napoli because they'll have played Liverpool. So any kind of fear factor that might be there, say, for example, I know they played Ajax the other year, but that was with nobody there. Rangers might be a little bit fearful, you'd imagine. Won't be near that from Napoli. They'll just go for it. So I can't see it being in terms of the actual atmosphere, and I believe it's going to be a sellout. Too different to what they've experienced already at Goodison and at Old Trafford, if a little bit more. Probably a bit more shouty, I'd imagine, a bit more passionate. So in that sense, the players can't, they must be prepared for that. In terms of the actual football itself, it's the one thing that English football has above Italian football is the intensity. And the worry for Liverpool is that they've not been able to do that this season because of all the players that are out. So the one obvious advantage that they've got might not be there. So it may be a game where they have to look to play with elements of control. And then that brings you back to which players have they got available that can do that, which we'll get onto in a bit with the team selection. So I think Klopp's got some interesting calls to make because I think that the next game is just the following week, isn't it? Home to Ajax. So again, imperfect storm. The one time that the Champions League starts early in the season and finishes early, the group stage, is the one time that Liverpool have got quite a lot of players out. As you can see from the fact they haven't even put Keita or Oxlade-Chamberlain in the squad because even if they're back in 6 weeks, they'll have missed almost all of the games. So what's the point of them being in it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? But I suppose, Lynchy, a point would be no bad result, would it? Liverpool don't have to go there and go all out and try and win. They've got 5 more games after that to get those wins in. A point, you'd probably take that.
Yeah, without a doubt. That this is definitely the toughest game of the group. So yeah, to come away with a point, especially at a ground where they've been beaten, regularly in recent history, I think they'll think it'll be good. And I suppose it sort of makes their mind up for them a little bit about what they do over there as well. In that they're not in unbelievable form. They have got injuries still, and particularly in the middle of the park, which is so important in Champions League games. So in the last couple of times they've been there, the idea is that Liverpool have been expected to sort of impose themselves upon Napoli and be the big team in that equation and come away with a win. Whereas this time, they can settle for it being a scrappy game. They can play as much of a part in making it difficult for Napoli rather than having to be the ones who play all the football as Napoli look to sort of hit on the counter. I think Liverpool can go into this and treat it as a real away game against a big Champions League opponent. And that, hopefully that'll play into their hands a little bit, make things easier to sort of decide what their identity is out there. Because if they can just take a point, a 0-0, absolutely fine. And then if you can nick one from a set piece or anything like that, or play a bit of football on the counter because Napoli overcommit, then absolutely perfect. But yeah, there's no pressure on Liverpool to go there and put in a convincing performance and win. I know the players and the manager will put that pressure on themselves, but I think from outside, as you say, a point is absolutely fine. So I think that hopefully that makes things slightly easier for them going out there.
I wonder whether there might be an argument as well, Rich, that it's just something a little bit different. It's away from the league. It's starting to get into a bit of a packed fixture schedule to get into that rhythm that Jurgen Klopp loves. It's just a bit of a change up. That almost might help Liverpool in that sense. Yeah,
I mean, I had a story out this morning at 6 a.m. for all the milkmen already out who like to read a little bit of Liverpool on the way around, exactly around that point that although it's been a pretty underwhelming start to the Premier League season. Start of a new European campaign does give Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp a chance to park that for a minute and look at a different competition and maybe with a bit of a fresh approach. He's got the same players to pick from, obviously. A couple are back. Those problems that they've got in midfield haven't gone away, but it is a new competition and it's one that involves less games spread out over the same period of time. So whereas we look at expectations perhaps being reset in the Premier League, I don't think there's any need to do that just yet in the Champions League, certainly before the ball's even being kicked. I do agree with Ian and Dave, though. I think a draw there is a perfectly acceptable result. In fact, I'd be quite happy with a 0-0, to be honest with you. It'll be another clean sheet for Liverpool in a very difficult ground full of mad fans in an extremely hostile environment. It's just annoying, isn't it, with Liverpool? Familiarity breeds contempt, doesn't it? And in these Champions League group stages, quite often you see the same teams getting drawn together in group stage stages. I think this must be the third time Liverpool have been drawn with Napoli. So I think the fact that the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium is a lively one probably just adds a bit of an element to this one that might not be there with other familiar fixtures. But yeah, I think controlling that game and just getting out of there with a 0-0, I'd be quite happy with that. And who knows, they might even nick a win on the break.
Yes, absolutely. Well, just before we finish the show, then we'll pick our teams for the game. As a disclaimer, we're doing this on Monday before the press conference. Still a couple of days for either players to come back or for more players to get injured. But Doyle, I'll come to you first. We know it's going to be Alisson Becker in goal, but maybe one or two decisions to make across the defence.
No, giving Adrian a chance in goal. No, get rotated in. He made a very good save there last time. Yeah, you can forget that. Yeah, so it could be aces. Yeah. So this will also like, but right. Tough one. Can you come back to me on that? Do someone else first.
It is a tough one, isn't it? I think the fact that Trent came off.
Actually, I've changed my mind. I've changed my mind. I've got it right. Right, Robertson has to start. I'd play Matip, Van Dijk, and put Gomez right back.
Interesting. I would bring Matip in, but I'm not sure I'd go for Gomez. Again, Lynchy. I think the fact that the Trent came off after an hour probably is more with Napoli in mind than any sort of performance-related thing. But who are you going to go for?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think Matip back fit be important to getting some games into him, so it's a really good opportunity. And then Trent at right back, because I think that was the idea with that sub, because it certainly wasn't to make Liverpool play any better. So you might as well use the benefit of that and get him straight back in for this one. And Van Dijk and Robertson, the rest of the back four. Rich,
which way are you going?
It's tricky, isn't it? I think there's a few question marks over quite a few of the positions here. I'm certainly not advocating dropping Virgil van Dijk, but even he hasn't been brilliant, has he? But Van Dijk's in. I would put Matip alongside him. Back fit, I think he's such a key player, I think, especially for Trent as well, I reckon. So just getting him back in there. It's a bit harsh on Gomez because I thought he had a very good game against Everton. And there is a temptation to keep him in the side but move him to right back. But I am going to go with Trent, Matip, Van Dijk and Andy Robertson.
Change my mind. I'm dropping Van Dijk. Right, so it's going to be Matip and
Gomez.
Yeah, he needs a rest.
Right.
He needs a rest. Right. And also, he's basically, I'm giving him a rest. Well, when else can you give him a rest? I think it was the first game last season in the Champions League he didn't play against AC Milan. So I'm going with this one. I'm going to go with Gomez and Matip, and I'm going to put Trent right back and Robertson left back. There you go.
There's your headline, Matt.
Interesting. Midfield, Doyley?
Okay, well, Fabinho's got to play. I think the guy that Theo calls Arthur will play, because obviously he's played in Serie A, and even if he gets an hour out of him, or even 45 minutes, to be honest, because it's 5 subs in it, that'll be okay. And in terms of the third one, that's tricky. I'm not sure whether I want to play Harvey. Don't know.
I know who I want to play, and it's not going to be popular.
You're not giving yourself a start, are you, Matt?
Well, I said me.
Already left
I said Curtis Jones against. I said Curtis Jones against Everton. He didn't. All right, I'm going to play Milner. There you go. There's the 3.
Yeah,
Milner.
I'm Milner as well. I think you need that experience really for Napoli, but I can't imagine the replies to some tweets if he does play. But Lynchy,
well, instead of hang on. If he plays, then why don't they just direct him at Jurgen Klopp? He's the one who picks the team, not us. We're just guessing.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
no one does though, do they? No one ever goes up. No one ever does it, do they? No, honestly, no. What's wrong with this? Anyway.
On that subject, by the way, people can stop emailing me and asking me why various players are playing. I don't have a direct line. I can't forward it to Jurgen Klopp.
I'm sorry. I will stop emailing you, Matt. I'm sorry.
Lynchy, midfield?
To be honest, I had down Fabinho, Milner, and then one other, and I'm just thinking who the one other could be, and I think you can't keep putting Harvey Elliott in every single game. He's still a young player. Carvalho's obviously got that dead leg. Curtis Jones, it sort of went under the radar, but he wasn't in the squad for the derby, so that's worrying. Maybe a little knock or something. So I think your only option really is, even though it's not ideal, is to throw Arthur in. As Doyle mentioned, he's got experience of playing in Serie A, so maybe that helps him a little bit of knowledge. And what we spoke about earlier in terms of just getting out there with a 0-0 would be fine. He's a player who does, we've seen what we know of him is that he's good at, keeping the ball, maybe some safe passes at times, but that might work well in an away game in the Champions League. That might be really helpful if you can just help Liverpool tick it over and keep possession away from Napoli. So I think that would be my three.
Yeah, if he can do an hour and Thiago maybe can have a half hour or something like that, that might work out. But Rich, your midfield three, are you with the rest of us or any other shouts?
Basically, yeah. Fabinho was always in. I had Milner down as a bit of a dead cert, to be honest with you. He's the type of dogged character you want in the middle to ruffle a few Italian feathers. Used to playing in atmospheres and grounds like that, bags of experience, exactly what they need in a game like this. So the only other question mark was whether you throw Arthur Melo into this side. A good point about his Serie A experience, but he's been brought in as someone who's apparently good on the ball and can play a bit. Yeah, he will be short of fitness, but I'd agree, if you start him, if you can get that control early doors, and even if you can't last the game, then you can look to make changes from there in. So yeah, Fabinho, Milner, and Arthur. Will it be Arthur midfield? We'll have to wait and see.
Doyle, attack?
Who do you want me to attack?
God. Wow.
How long have we been doing this podcast and no one's made that joke yet?
I wonder why.
Arthur, by the way, has played Napoli 3 times. Once for Barcelona, twice for Juventus, and he's never lost. He's won 2 and drew 1.
Oh, no brainer.
Admittedly, only started one of those games as Marby played in the other 2, but still counts. Up front, I think it's going to be Salah's playing, despite the fact that some people think he's rubbish now. Diaz on the left. It's interesting up front. I thought Firmino was really good when he came on against Everton, but he can't play midfield in this game, I don't think. And Nunez. This is Champions League, which is where obviously he made his reputation. So he likes these kind of occasions. I think I'd start with Nunez.
Yeah, got to be Nunez for me. I thought Diaz looked a little bit tired at the weekend, Lynch. Are you keeping him in? Is there an argument maybe for Diogo Jota to come in, or possibly might not be ready? I suppose he's only just come back himself, hasn't he? But which way are you going to go?
Yeah, I thought maybe Jota on the left-hand side just to give Diaz a bit of a rest. I think it's just as important really to get the minutes into Jota's legs as soon as possible as well. And the 5 subs gives you the opportunity to, make the sub whenever you want. And so I think that, Jota on the left-hand side. I think up front, I mentioned earlier about Nunez, maybe getting him to Anfield, getting him in front of that crowd, getting in a game that Liverpool are probably going to dominate quite a lot. That would probably be better for his confidence than chasing the ball around a little bit in Naples and having to do all that hard work that comes to the Champions League away game. I think it's going to be very scrappy. So, I don't think that'll be great for him. So I think possibly ideal conditions to bring Firmino in for a start up front. And then that sets you up then to have Nunez coming in against Wolves at the weekend. And obviously Salah, when he's fit, starts every game. So that's my front 3.
Rich, which way are you going?
Slightly differently. Salah in on the right as usual. I expect Liverpool to do a fair bit of defending in this game and having to absorb the ball a bit deeper in the pitch. And I think if you've got an outlet like Diaz who can run in behind them, he still looks very dangerous to me. And I would have him in from the start, I think. And then if that's not working, maybe mix it up with Jota later. Nunez. Look, he's been kicking his heels for 3 games. He's had nothing to do. So I'd like to see him down the middle and causing some problems, even if it's with balls in the air or whatnot, for that Napoli defence, give them something to think about. Liverpool will play quite a lot of money for him. I'd like to think he could play twice in a week. So I'll go with Salah and Diaz supporting Nunez as the top of the tree.
Interesting. Well, let's do our match predictions then. I think I'm going to go 1-1. I think Liverpool will score, but I don't think they'll keep a clean sheet necessarily. Dodie, what's your score prediction?
Can't see Liverpool winning. So
0-0?
it's either going to be lose 1-0 or 0-0.
Let's go 0-0 then. Let's be positive. Lynchy?
Yeah, I think 0-0. I think it's going to be a horrible game to watch. 0-0.
Can't wait. Thanks, Lynchy.
With your 4 a.m.
The Youth
start.
League game will be better. The Youth League game will be better earlier in the day, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes, should be more goals in that one. Rich, what are you going to go for?
Well, I think I'll complete the binary prediction with a 0-0.
Wow.
What a game this is going to be.
not a great moment for BT Sport, but other highlights of other games will be available.
Absolutely. Well, on that bombshell, I think we'll finish up there. If you want to catch our coverage of the game as usual, that'll be on Wednesday. We've got Jurgen Klopp's press conference as well from Italy on Tuesday evening. Until next time, though, from all of us here, it's goodbye for now.